Processes Session 3, Part 1, Working in New Builds. At the end of this part of the session, you should all be able to explain the difference between first fix and second fix, explain the procedures for storing materials on site and also a little bit about delivery, and describe some of the techniques used in first fix installation. So first and second fix. When working on site, the job's split into two parts, first fix and second fix. I'm going to talk about those now. First fix essentially is everything that's before the walls and the floors and the plasterboard are put in. So this is going to be running your water supply pipes and drainage pipes under the floors or in the walls or the ceiling spaces. And what you do then, once you've run all your pipes as part of the first fix operation, you then leave tails coming out of the wall or out of the floor at the place where the appliances are going to be installed. Second fix is essentially the completion work. Everything after the floor and the plasterboard and the plastering is being done. So it's things like sort of fitting bathrooms, fitting radiators, all of the sort of what we call finishing work. Before you start, you need to order the materials, and we're going to briefly look at the process for that now. Some companies might ask you to fill in a requisition form or a purchase order to purchase materials, and then the buyer from the company would buy it from the cheapest merchant or the most best priced merchant. Once the materials have been ordered, you can either pick them up or, in most cases on a building site, if there's a lot of materials, they'll be delivered to you. When the materials are delivered to you, they would come with the delivery advice note. This is a list of everything that should be in the order, and you should check against the delivery advice note before you sign it. Once the goods have been received, your company would then be sent an invoice, which is another way of saying a bill, saying how much they owe the merchant. Once they've paid it, they'd be sent a remittance advice note, which is another way of saying a receipt to say that they've paid it. So once the materials have been delivered to the site or picked up, we then need to store them and store them safely. The best way to do that on a building site is using a container. It'd be a good idea to build some sort of shelves in the container so you can sort of store more things, and so you're not having to stack things on top of each other, which could cause a risk of injury or a risk of damage to the items. So make sure you don't stack things too high, and it's a good idea to install shelving to increase the usable space. So if you did work in an existing property, you'd transport the materials with you to site. You normally pick them up at the merchant and take them with you. So make sure that you lock your van up whilst you're working in the property to prevent theft. Once you've got your materials delivered and you've started work on the building site, you'd start off by marking out or setting out where the components are going to go and where your main runs are going to be, and that helps you to sort of just to carry out the job really, if you can clearly see where everything needs to run to. So firstly, mark out the runs using the drawings, drill and notch the joists, and then you can start to run the pipe work. You may need to also cut through different parts of the building fabric. Building fabric is essentially sort of all of the things that make up the building. It could be the wooden joists or potentially the brick walls. And there's various ways to sort of cut through the brick. I mean, you might sort of cut out a chase using a lump hammer and a cold chisel or a bolster, or you might sort of core holes through brick walls using a core drill and a core cutter. So once you've cut through the fabric and you've got it all planned out and thought out, then you can start to run the pipe work and take it to your end point. A key thing to remember is wherever the pipe passes through a supporting wall, it should be sleeved. There's lots of reasons for sleeving pipes, okay? One of the reasons is particularly for metal pipes, wouldn't obviously apply to plastic pipes, would be to protect it from corrosion. Some of the acids in cement and brickwork can damage metallic pipe. One that would apply to all pipework types is to allow for thermal expansion. As the pipes heat up and cool down, they'll expand and they'll contract, and if it's held firmly in the wall, that could cause a leak over time. So having the sleeve in there allows the pipe to expand and contract without being held firmly in the wall. We also need to remember that buildings settle over time. The longer a building's been standing, the more it will start to settle into the ground, and that can cause pipes to burst. And having a sleeve there would actually help protect the wall from getting filled with water if the pipe was to burst. So if you do cut through the external wall, if you have to core through the external wall, make sure that you always check outside before you do that drilling, so nothing's sort of falling down and doing damage to things that might be outside the property. If you have a quick look and check and ask the customer to move anything that might be easily damaged. Where pipes do pass through firewalls or through the ceiling, we should use intumescent collars. Okay, most people will call them a fire collar, and these essentially are there to prevent the spread of fire. What happens is if there was a fire, an intumescent is something that essentially swells when it's heated up. So if there was a fire, this intumescent substance would start to swell up and close any gap that there might be, which could allow air through, which could help to sort of feed the fire essentially. We also need to make sure we insulate pipes anywhere where they're likely to get cold. There's lots of different types of insulation. You can see fiberglass insulation here, PVC insulation here, and expanded rubber insulation here. And the important reason to insulate is because when water turns to ice, it expands. It actually expands by 10%. And that can cause pipes to burst, and it does cause pipes to burst. So insulation would help slow down the cold, essentially, as it penetrating, and reduce the likelihood of it bursting due to freezing. So we should make sure that we insulate anywhere that's unheated, essentially. So say, for example, an unheated garage, any pipes that are run externally, or even through external walls, for example, to an outside tap. Pipes under suspended floors as well should be insulated, as well as in loft spaces. All key areas to insulate. Just a quick picture here showing some pipes under the suspended floors. You can see it's particularly important to insulate them under suspended floors, because it's literally going to be as cold as outside, because we've got these air bricks in there to prevent sort of the build-up of damp under the house. So it's going to be as cold under the floor as it is outside. If the pipe does run a very long way, or it goes into somewhere that's likely to be particularly cold, you might want to use trace heating, though it's not something we're ever really likely to use in a domestic property. What trace heating does is essentially it's just a wire that sort of coils around the pipe, and as electricity runs through it, it starts to heat up a little bit, and it can be used to sort of offset the heat losses that might happen through the insulation. Again, as we've talked about previously, we need to make sure that all of our pipework is adequately clipped and insulated where necessary. And that's just to make sure that the system works efficiently in all weathers and doesn't leak or disturb the customer through noise. Another key bit of info really, it's not likely to come up in your test, but it's just useful to know really. As part of your first fix, it is very, very sensible to put something on the pipes to make it clear and obvious which pipes basically, which one's the cold, which one's the hot. You might decide to use different tapes, say for example one for red for hot, blue for cold, and maybe sort of electrical tape or whatnot, like the green and yellow stuff to denote the heating pipework, you know, or grey. You get loads of different sort of coloured tapes, so it's useful having a system to make sure that you're aware of what's coming up through the floor when you come back to it later on, you know. Another key bit of information that probably will come up in the test is, and it's also a good thing to do in real life, make sure you put a bit of tape or some stop ends over the ends of the pipe. So because as the construction process carries on, there will end up being sort of bits of muck and dust and sawdust, all sorts of stuff that could fall into these pipes and start to gum things up. So make sure that you cover up the ends of the pipe, either using tape or using stop ends to stop things getting in and clogging up the system. Okay, second fix. So once you've got all your pipe work in and it's popped up through the floors, the joiners and plasterers have completed the walls and floors, you can then move on to second fix. Be particularly careful with second fix, because obviously it's something that's the customer is going to see, you know. Some tasks can only be carried out in situ, and that would be anything that you connect onto something that's already in place. If for example, if you put a new sort of distribution pipe into a cold water storage system that was already in place, then that would have to be carried out in situ, because you'd be connecting to something that was already existing. Okay, but also you might it might be more appropriate to prefabricate before installing. And another, if we kind of use the cold water storage system as an example again, if you're fitting a brand new cold water storage system, you build it all up out of position, where it's sort of you can comfortably get in and around and tighten everything up, and then put it into position before then connecting your sort of pipework to it. So that would be prefabricating. You'd be doing it out of position and then moving it into position. Okay. So now it is time for your task.